Peace, this your host, Selah, Shalom. And this is a Cosmon Teachings in the words of Jehovah and his angel ambassadors from the Cosmon Bible, OAHSPE. And the topic of discussion today is called the creation and crossbreed of mortals. Now, as I exposed in the last video that man was not created on the sixth day and that the creation account is false, created by fallen angels. So when was man created on the earth? Now, as I explained on the timetables of prophecy, that the earth goes through 4 ages. The time of creation, which is 144,000 years for each age. The first age is the time of creation. The second age, the time of inhabitation. The third age, the time of barrenness. And the fourth age, the time of rest. So if we're talking about the creation of mortals, that would take place during the time of creation. The time of creation consists of when the earth was formed and suitable for vegetation and animal life. That entails the time of creation. Now, since we're dealing with the time of creation, we're dealing with the first age. Now let's examine the first age, the time of creation, and its cosmological breakdown. The first age is 144,000 years, consisting of 48 arc cycles of 3,000 years, and has 6 Gadol periods of 24,000 years. A Gadol period is compared to a procession. A half age is 72,000 years and consists of 24 arc cycles of 3,000 years and has 3 Gadol periods of 24,000 years. Now, this is the blueprint we're going to use to pinpoint where mortals were created in this construct. Now, in the book of knowledge, chapter 4, verse 17, it states, "By Jehovah in mastery over his person created he countless worlds, of which the corporeal earth is one. And he created the living thereon, and the time was 1 Gadol, 24,000 years." With this verse, it states Jehovah created the living in 1 Gadol, within the time span of 24,000 years. Now, if there are 6 Gadol periods in one age, which Gadol period was mortals created in? It would be the 6th Gadol period, being the last 24,000 years of the first age. To give some further insight on this, in the book of Cosmogony and Prophecy, chapter 5, verse 17 and verse 19, it states, verse 17, "Place the Simuan age, the time of creation, at 99 degrees, the time of quickening animal life." Now that would consist with this last 24,000 year period in the first age. And it is within this Gadol period that animals and mortals were created. Verse 19, "To find the Simuan age, the time of creation, especially for man, place his temperature at 98 for good health, and 102 at inflammation or death. 4 below normal, therefore, would be the period of man's inhabitation on earth. After the vortexian radiation reaches this period, man will cease to propagate and so become extinct as to the earth." So this verse shows the vortexian temperature that determines the survival of man on earth through bodily temperature. So when the Creator created animals and mortals, it was within this period, this last 24,000 years of the first age, the 6th Gadol. Now we are narrowing down and pinpointing when was mortals created, being on the borderline of the first and second age. Now we're going to further pinpoint the creation of mortals. Now, a Gadol of 24,000 years is broken down into 8 arc cycles of 3,000 years. Now, out of these 8 arc cycles, which cycle was mortals created in? And there's an answer to this. In the first book of the First Lords, chapter 2, verse 1, it states, "The time of the habitation of Asu was 8,000 years, and they survived 2,000 years after the time of the birth of the Ions," the little people, the pygmies, which is to say, Asu, or Adam, or the Adamites, dwelt on the earth 6,000 years, and then conceived of the chosen of God, being the pygmy, the little people, and after that survived yet 2,000 years. Now this verse states that primitive man, Asu, dwelt 6,000 years before the birth of the little people, or the Ions, the pygmies. The birth of the Ions came during the beginning of the first arc cycle, being the arc of Wan, of the second age, the beginning of the time of inhabitation. As stated in the book of Synopsis of 16 cycles, verse 1, chapter 1, verse 5, it states, verse 5, "At the time of the creation of man, the earth was traveling in the arc of Wan, where dwelt thousands of Orion chiefs, with thousands and millions of high-raised angels." Now, If we count 6,000 years before the ark of Wan, it brings us here. And it is here that mortals were created, the time of creation of mortals. See that? So within the second half of the first age was mortals created. And 6,000 years before the second age, the time of inhabitation. So if we take the second half of the first age, being 72,000 years, and subtract 6,000 years, we get 66,000 years. So 66,000 years within the second half of the first age, mortals were created. And 6,000 years before the beginning of the second age, the time of inhabitation. Now with that, we have 66,000 and 6,000. The nature of the beast, the mark of the beast is primitive man, animal man, man in his lowest form. Just as a baby comes into the world having no knowledge and have to develop knowledge, likewise, mortals in the beginning. The first teachers to mortals were the animals. And mortals in the beginning mimicked the animals. The behavior, the sound, the foods, the nature of animal in man. This is why animals were revered in antiquity. Now in the book of Cosmogony in Prophecy chapter 8 verse 7 it states, verse 7, consequently, the two most important periods of the prophet's consideration comes within 33 and 66, or as they say of old, man and beast, in which measure man is divided into two parts, man and beast, and there is ever a percentage in his behavior in clinging to one or the other, and they correspond to the vortexian currents of the earth. So here the beast is represented by the numerical value of 66, referring to the nature of man as beast, animal man in its primitive state, prior to becoming civilized and prior to the crossbreed. Now let's examine the condition of the earth at the time of the creation of mortals. Now, plate 6, the Simuan firmament. Jehovah said, behold, I caused all living creatures to gestate in the darkness. And this shall be the testimony to the end of the world, that when I created life on the face of the earth, she traveled in my Simuan firmament. Simuan meaning the time of creation. So when the earth was being formed through the first age of 144,000 years, that's the Simuan time, the time of creation. So here all living creatures gestate in darkness. So the light of the sun was overcast with darkness. What is this darkness? Plate 38, the earth in Simu. Jehovah said, in the time of Simu, the time of creation, I brought forth the earth into Ajah and Jae, and darkness was upon the face of the earth for the space of 3,000 years. And yet, for other 3,000 years, half darkness covered all the land and water. See that? Behold, O man, as I have given to females a time to bring forth their young, so gave I to the earth a time for the conception of living species on the land, in the water, and in the air above. And I call the time the era of Simu, or the time of creation. See that? So with this verse, it states that semi-darkness covered the face of the earth at the creation of mortals. This 6,000 years of semi-darkness was during the last 6,000 years of the first age when mortals were created. It wasn't bright and sunny like it is now. The conditions of the earth at that time was like how it is when it gets to twilight in the evening. See that? So the Ajah, the Jaya are atmospheric densities that the earth travels through in its orbital course with the sun, and it goes through these different atmospheric densities. And I'll give examples of these times of darkness that the earth goes through. As stated in the book of Thor, son of Jehovah, chapter 6, verse 11, it states, verse 11, I have prepared places of darkness in the Etherian firmament and places of light, and my corporeal worlds must travel through them. For so I created them, and these places of darkness and places of light are as changes of seasons for my harvest. See that? So when mortals were created, the earth was in semi-darkness due to the earth's travel in Ajah. And another example of this darkness, first book of the first Lord, chapter 4, verse 16, it gives another example of this semi-darkness. Verse 16, so the Lord and his angel hosts departed away from the earth, and clouds came over the face of the earth. The moon shone not, and the sun was only as a red coal of fire. And the stars stood in the firmament as well in the day as at night. See that? Another example of semi-darkness and how it affects the planet. Another example, the Lord's fourth book, chapter 4, verse 24, it states, verse 24, and Jehovah cast a veil over the face of the sun, and it shone not in brightness for many years. So these verses are examples of times when the earth is in semi-darkness, coinciding with the darkness at the time that mortals were created. So at the creation of man, for that first 6,000 years, mortals were living in a state of darkness, literally and mentally, the nature of beast in man. Now, at the end of 6,000 years of darkness, which is the very ending of the first age, the time of creation, the light of the first arc cycle of the second age, being the arc of Wane, came. And this is where the crossbreeding comes into play. Now, angels were sent down to help lift man up from darkness, as stated in the book of Inspiration, chapter 6, verse 21 through 23, where it states, verse 21, and this is the condition of man in the beginning. And man was unconscious of his creation, not knowing whence he came, nor knew he which was his own species. The same way when a baby comes into the world, the baby comes into the world unconscious, not knowing who he is or who she is, having no knowledge of herself. Verse 22, and I sent angels to man to teach him who he was and to rouse him up to his capabilities for which I created him. See that? So the angels were acting as parents, because when we have children, the children are incapable of learning. We have to teach them. If you leave a kid out in the wilderness with no parents, he will come up with no knowledge. Basic primitive knowledge will be his standpoint. Verse 23, and more likely he will be mimicking his environment. So if there's animals around, he will mimic what the animals are doing. Hence the behavior of animal and man. Verse 23, and my angels drew from man's side substance, and thus took on corporeal form. And the angels dwelt with man as helpmates to make man understand. So here it states, man was unconscious of self, and the purpose of the angels was to make man understand himself, help lift him up. So like I said before, the first teachers of morals prior to these angels were the animals. And being that all mortals were in a state of ignorance and darkness, there was no mortal example on how to be civil. All mortals expressed and mimicked the animals in nature, hence the term animal man. Mortals come into this world crawling on all fours before walking upright. All races go through this process. Now, what animal do you know walks upright? None. So if mortals mimic the animals in the beginning, mortals would have been moving damn near on all fours, hunched and stooped over, because there was no example of an upright walking animal until the angels came and lift man up, literally. So the angels that came were the ones that began to civilize mortals, separating them from the animalistic nature. See that? Who were these angels? In the book of Synopsis of 16 Cycles, chapter 1, verse 6 and 7, it states, the Holy Council of Orion chiefs, through the wisdom and voice of Jehovah, appointed one of their number, Centantes, to take charge of the earth and to people it with immortal beings during its travel in Wane. See that? So now we have the angel who was commissioned to take charge of the earth after man's creation. Verse 7, and the rank and title of Centantes, thus raised up by Jehovah, creator of worlds, was first God of the earth and her heavens. See that? So OAHSPE gives you the very first God to rule over this planet. No different than we had to have a first president so we could pinpoint and track the reigning presidents. Likewise, OAHSPE leaves you a chronology of these reigning gods. So here we have the archangel Centantes and his host that came down to the earth 6,000 years after the creation of mortals to help mortals become civil. Now, out of his host of angels, There were many who died in infancy on their native planet and never experienced a physical life. As stated in the book of Jehovah, chapter 6, verse 14, it states, verse 14, "There alighted upon the new earth millions of angels from heaven, but many of them had never fulfilled a corporeal life, having died in infancy, and these angels comprehended not procreation nor corporeal life." See that? So when you think about miscarriages and abortions, these babies, fetuses, they don't die off and dissipate into non-existence. They continue to grow in spirit. That's why the verse stated, "But many of them had never fulfilled the corporeal life, having died in infancy. And these angels comprehended not procreation nor corporeal life." So it's telling you right there that these angels died in infancy when they was in corporality, but they survived in spirit. And now they're coming to a world to experience a life that they missed out on because they died in infancy. See, the Creator don't waste nothing. So these angels will be the ones to crossbreed with mortals due to the fact that they never experienced corporeal life. So this is new to them, just like it is new to us today. This is our first time experiencing a corporeal life. Now you have many people that'll say, "Oh, I lived before," but that's nonsense. Verse 16, "And now was the earth in the later days of Semu, and the angels could readily take on corporeal bodies for themselves. Out of the elements of the earth clothed they themselves, by force of their wills, with flesh and bones. By the side of the Asuans, the Adamites, primitive man, took they on corporeal form." So with that right there, it's telling you that the angels manifested using the materials of the earth, the mineral construct of this planet, to materialize before the Adamites, to appear before primitive man. Now here's the verse where the angels crossbred with mortals. Now in the book of Sentanti, son of Jehovah, chapter 1, verse 2 through 5, it states, "And the archangel Sentantes was the wisest of them all. And he said unto them," verse 3, "Behold, we have come from far off heavens by the voice of Jehovah. Came we to partake of the glory of the red star, the earth. Jehovah said to us, Come ye and enjoy the new world I have created. Partake ye of all the fruits thereof, except of the tree of knowledge, which is the fountain of life. Partake ye not of this, lest ye die." So the instructions of not partaking in the tree of knowledge were given to the angels. Verse 4, "But the voice of the earth spake unto us, saying, Partake ye, for indeed mine is the tree of everlasting life." Verse 5, "And many obeyed not the voice of the Father, and are now bound by the tie of life, which is in the blood." See that? So this verse basically describes how the angels crossbred with mortals. Now when we look at primate blood, the RH factor, the ABO, we will find that the A and B blood lineage is connected to earth, is connected to the animal kingdom. But when we look at the O blood has no connection to the animal kingdom or to primitive man. So with that being said, O blood is foreign to the planet, and scientists have no clue of the origin of where O blood comes from. So with that being said, that's our connection to these angels. Because when the angels took on form, as the book said, by the power of their own will, they took on corporeal form using the elements of the earth. So if they took on form, manifesting themselves by their own will in flesh and blood, that right there shows that they are not connected to the animal kingdom, being that they manifested by their will. So they would have no tie to the animal kingdom. In return, would have no tie to the AB blood. So it would have to be these angels that carry this old blood that is foreign to the planet, because scientists already admit they don't know where the old blood comes from. It has no primate root to it. Now you got O positive and O negative blood types. If you are O negative, that means you have no trace of what they call rhesus monkey, RH factor. So that means you would be a pure bloodline if you have O negative. Now if you O positive, that means you still have the genealogy of the angel, and you have the genealogy of primitive man through the RH factor being a rhesus monkey. Not saying man come from monkey, but just showing you there's a connection. Because man, or mortals, are the highest manifestation of animal on the planet. So we will have traits of all animals in us. We would have those characteristics. So with that being said, through the blood is how we could prove the lineage. O blood negative is a rare blood. I'm an O blood. My mother's O negative. We have that trace in us. So that's the connection between primitive man and the angels. It's the blood. So the missing link is the angels. That's the missing link. The ancient astronauts. Some will say the Anunnakis. I don't agree with that, because the Anunnakis, that's OAHSPE and his concept of his creation tale with the fallen angels and the Amuna Elise, the Babylonian tales, the 7-day creation tale. All that comes from a fallen angel. So I do not agree with the Anunnaki concept of being the crossbreeders of early man. Now, in the first book of the First Lords, chapter 1, verse 3, it states, "And it came to pass that a new race was born on the earth, and these were called Ions, because they were begotten of both heaven and earth. Hence it became a saying, the earth conceive of the Lord." So here, the little people, the Ions, they are a crossbreed between primitive man and the angels. Verse 4, "And the name of the first race was Asu, or the Adamites, or primitive man, because they were of the earth only." Now, being of the earth only, that means your blood type would be A, B, A, B. There will be no traces of O if you're from the earth only. And then it states, "And the name of the second race was Ions, or Abel, or the Pygmies, because they were capable of being taught spiritual things." See that? The second race, the Ions, were capable of being taught spiritual things. Why? Because they have that angelical blood in them. They have that old blood in them. And with that, I'd like to say peace and blessings, and catch you on the next documentary. Shalom.